What is up, guys? It is the Bluebloods here, back with y'all with another episode, man. We are headed to the Pac-12 as this week we're wrapping up our Power 5 previews, our college football previews. Pac-12 tonight, SEC on Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Central Time. Catch us live right now and on Wednesday on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, man. So make sure to check us out there. But Brandon, let's waste no time getting into the Pac-12, man. We got two big storylines we got to cover before we get into our predictions, game to watch, players to watch, all that. And it's the Pac-12 has a new commissioner. And it's been a long time coming. Larry Scott made a lot of questionable decisions, to say the least, at his time as Pac-12 commissioner. So for you, what do you think his top priority is right now? Do you think it has to do with the TV deal that hasn't necessarily worked out very well for the Pac-12? Is it getting these games into better time slots? What would you like to see this new Pac-12 commissioner move to the top of his list?
I think it absolutely has to be the better time slots. I mean, you and I like to come on here, and ever since the beginning of this podcast, it's been kind of a joke and kind of a joke. That kind of is like the main word there about Pac-12 after dark. And, oh, we love seeing these games, so late. Like, we're watching games at like midnight Central Time sometimes. So, like, that's tough on us, and that's tough for the East Coast. And I understand that's just like a normal time slot if you're on the West Coast. So I totally understand that. But why not shoot for more games, and not even necessarily like noon games, because they do have some games at like 11 o'clock Central for some reason. So they're just playing at 9 a.m. on the West Coast. I feel like you have to gun for more games right there in the middle of the day, more primetime games. I'm talking like 5 o'clock Pacific time, so that would be like 7 o'clock Central, Zach, 8 o'clock Eastern. That is prime time, and you have the teams to do it. I mean, you have the Oregon States, the Washington, USC, and even Arizona State. So, you have teams that people want to watch. You and I know we're crazy people, and we like to watch football even when football's not on. Like I've been saying on every single live stream so far, I've just been going back watching games. It doesn't even have to be like an LSU game. It could just be any game. If I find it on YouTube or wherever, I'm just gonna go through and watch that game. I can't remember which game I watched the other day, but it's just something totally off the wall. But they have games people want to watch, people that even aren't us. So why not shoot for that better time zone? ESPN would eat that up. And I mean, especially with the resurgence of teams like Oregon and Washington, with them growing in popularity again, I think that that's an attainable goal for them.
And I mean, also, I would also like to see, so when they have those big games, when the Michigans, the Ohio States, they have those games and it's a home and home, clearly Ohio State and Fox didn't care about the fans in Oregon, because that game kicks off at 11 a.m. Eastern time, I believe, or Central time, which is like 9 a.m. So Oregon, Ohio State kicks off at 9 o'clock for Oregon fans. So why don't you return the favor? When Ohio State returns that home and home, why doesn't that kick off at 7 p.m. Pacific time?
Yeah.
Put that in prime time for your fans then. Also, if you're the Pac-12, the number one thing you have to do is fight for equity. They haven't done that. Larry Scott just sat by as all these other conferences passed up the Pac-12 in terms of TV revenue, in terms of recruiting, in terms of everything like that. The biggest thing for this new commissioner to do is fight for the Pac-12 and fight for your product, which is something Larry Scott never did. And also, just try. I think that's what we're getting with the alliance is get in with some of these other conferences. Make sure your strength of schedule is there, which it is. Make sure that you're getting in front of other recruits, which they are, and you're seeing Oregon's recruiting skyrocket, man. I mean, they're going to have another probably top 6 class for the second straight year. USC has landed 2 huge 5-stars and is putting together an outstanding 2022 and 2023 class. So the recruiting's going that way. The biggest thing I want to see is fighting for that equity, making sure the scheduling is there, making sure the TV deals are there. The Pac-12 network has been an atrocity, to say the least. So I would like to see that restructured, that rebranded, maybe even relaunched, Brandon, because I figured since they launched it after the Big Ten and SEC network that they would get the kinks worked out. They butchered it. Yeah, I mean, that's not even available in most, I guess most cable packages. Brandon, when's the last time you remember turning on the Pac-12 network?
I gotta be honest with you, Zach, I didn't know it was a thing until you just mentioned it, because I just didn't know. I'd always watch 12 on ESPN late at night. That was just where I watched it, or ABC or wherever.
Man, and listen, I mean, for me, that's the biggest thing for Pac-12 is exposure, and fighting for that equity. So those are the two biggest things that I want to see. And so, Brandon, that moves us perfectly into our next segment, which is, should the Pac-12 reconsider expansion or not expanding? So, guys, I don't know if you've heard our guy that we've had on the show, John Kurtz. We've had him twice. Is one of the sports directors here in Manhattan, Kansas for K-State football. He's one of the most plugged-in guys for the Big 12. And what he's heard with this alliance is the Pac-12 now is sitting still. They're not looking to add any of the leftover Big 12 teams. They're not looking to recruit anybody. And one source even told him that a Pac-12 AD or someone said that adding any of the leftover Big 12 teams added no value to the Pac-12. So, Brandon, do you think that's a good decision, or do you think the Pac-12 should reconsider expansion? And if they do, what teams would you like to see them realistically add to the conference?
I absolutely think they should consider expansion. Right after the Big 12, who's going to be left with 8 teams, the Pac-12 is going to be the second smallest conference. And I don't only think that the Pac-12 should be pulling for this. I don't think that they're the only ones. I think the ACC and Big Ten should also be pulling for this, because they're in that alliance. They're in that alliance that has, I think right now, 64 teams that vote on matters. Why not pull a few more teams into that, Zach? And as for teams that they should go for, I think the first most obvious choice here is BYU. I think you have to go for BYU. I know they're independent right now, so I'm not sure if they'd go for it, but I think that you should definitely try it. And if nothing else, like that brings that great rivalry between them and Utah to the table. And I mean, geographically, it just makes sense, right? Not only that, Zach, I think they should be gunning for Boise State as well, and maybe a few of the Big 12 teams. I think maybe I think Oklahoma State would be a good team to go for, because if you don't go for them, I know the SEC says they're not looking to expand anymore, but Oklahoma State
you can't trust the SEC with anything nowadays.
Well, you can't, and Oklahoma State's definitely looking to follow Oklahoma. That's just, I mean, I'm not going to say it's a fact, but it's very close to a fact. Like, they are going to want to follow Oklahoma to keep this rivalry alive. I mean, there was even state legislator in Oklahoma saying that they had to play every single season. Like, that was the thing. It was just crazy that you think that their Senate would go as far as to pass that bill, but it happened. But I think those are the two teams that I'd gun for the most. Maybe Oklahoma State, maybe a Kansas State or Kansas for basketball, something like that. The only team that I think is off the table from the Big 12, at least, Zach, it's going to be Texas Tech. I hate to say that, but like, really, what does Texas Tech bring to the table?
I feel you. I mean, so I do think they should reconsider. And Brandon, my list is completely different if they do reconsider. My number one candidate is weird. TCU would be my number one candidate.
Okay.
And I would want TCU to come along with Boise State. So if we're only adding 2 teams, I think TCU and Boise State should be those 2 teams. One, TCU's history already in the Rose Bowl would kind of add to that, you would add to that legacy of the Pac-12 and the Rose Bowl wins and things like that. So you could add TCU there. One, it would also help with your defensive perception issue, because everyone knows TCU is about defense. And Gary Patterson in the Pac-12 would fit perfectly. And I think it would, 1, increase your coaching presence, and 2, also bring you into the state of Texas, where that's a huge, huge plus for all your Pac-12 schools in terms of recruiting. And then I like Boise State because you bring back that TCU Boise State kind of Mountain West feel. Also, it fits geographically, and it really and truly, Brandon, outside of, all of these teams we're adding, who has a more historic past than Boise State out of the teams we're talking in recent college football history? I mean, Boise State since like 2002 has been the best team out of all these options that we're considering. So I like Boise State and also TCU. The other interesting one I would maybe like to see considered is Baylor, Brandon. And if I know we're a college football podcast, but if we expand out to other sports, would have the number one women's basketball program almost year in and year out. You would have the defending champions on the men's basketball team, and the football program has had some highs. Dave Aranda had a tough year last year due to COVID, but it was a low year. But really and truly, Baylor would add a lot of value in other sports as well. And I think K-State, Kansas be interesting basketball, but I think those are better geographical fits for the Big Ten. Plus, you could bring back that Nebraska, Kansas, those type of games that you got in like the old Big 12. So I like TCU and Boise State as my number 1 and 2. We got a comment here. Sadly, the Pac-12 thinks they're better than that. They're going to find out differently. If you aren't planning to win, you're planning to fail. That's a fact. And so let's get to our official preview here, Brandon. Let's get to the top games to watch. Now, we started a thing last episode because it kind of got crazy on our first few previews. So we're going to do conference and non-conference. So, Brandon, let's start with non-conference Pac-12 games that are really going to impact how the Pac-12 turns out. So what's your first non-conference game that you're looking forward to the most?
It has to be Oregon-Ohio State. I mean, that was the first game I mentioned for the Big Ten preview as well. That's just the game that I think a lot of people are looking forward to. Yeah, Ohio State's pretty highly favored in this game, but it's going to be two teams. I mean, Ohio State is favored to win the Big Ten, and Oregon's up there in the Pac-12. So I think this is going to be a battle of these two conferences. Yeah, I think we know who's going to win, and unfortunately, I had to say that in this Pac-12 preview. But Oregon State can prove us wrong. I mean, they are going into Columbus, and that's always daunting. But it's a home and home, so we'll see Ohio State back in Oregon, like you mentioned earlier, next season. It's going to be a really fun game to watch, though, Zach, and it comes really early in the season. It's week 2, September 11th. So I'm looking forward to that one.
And I'll build right off of it because that was one of them. And also that's a huge test for one, C.J. Stroud on the Big Ten side. And also I think that is Anthony Brown's whole act. His whole job security is on the line in that game. If you go out there and lay an egg like he has at times in big games at Boston College, Ty Thompson is the guy moving forward. You have to just say, okay, what's our ceiling with Anthony Brown? And that's going to be a big test. Also, Brandon, that same week, there's 2 games I want to talk about. One is Washington, Michigan, September 11th, going into the Big House. And 2, Colorado versus Texas A&M is another one I really like. And so I'll take Washington, Michigan first. Yeah. One, Jim Harbaugh's job is on the board. That is pinned. And it's waiting. It's just going to be – if he loses, take it off, throw it in the trash because it's over. I mean, let's just be honest. If Michigan – because, Brandon, I think the odds of Michigan getting their doors blown off is more likely than them actually winning this game. And that's – I know that might sound crazy, but I don't see how Michigan, with Alan Bowman possibly being quarterback, maybe you have K. McNamara starting – how the 5-star J.J. McCarthy isn't even getting a shot is beyond me. But you got 2 unproven quarterbacks going up against one of the best defensive minds in college football in Jimmy Lake. That defense for Washington is going to be something serious, which I'll get into later in the show. If Michigan goes in there and isn't even competitive, Brandon, how do you justify Harbaugh keeping his job?
You absolutely can't. And I know that I was on the train of, you can't fire Jim Harbaugh. Tables have turned. I think if you go 3 seasons in a row the way that Jim Harbaugh has been treating this job, he has to be off. I mean, he has to be gone, right?
If he's not, I don't know what he could do to get fired. He might as well just say he's got a lifetime contract if this year he underperforms and these days. And then also, Brandon, on the flip side, this is a big test for the Pac-12 non-conference. How, with the what everyone goes to. I'm an Auburn fan, and I've heard it, but the fact that Auburn, who didn't win the division either year, beat the Pac-12 champion to start the season is such a bad look. Yeah. And to get a huge win for a team that is going to compete for the Pac-12 title, to go out there and beat a team like Michigan is going to help the Pac-12's resume when it comes to college football playoff time. To have that win and say, we had a team that may or may not win the conference that went out there and beat a Big Ten team on the road in an early season matchup. So that'll be a huge one. And then Colorado, Texas A&M, Brent, I know everyone's like, how in the world is that a game? Colorado was 3-1 last year, and if their USC game got canceled due to COVID, if they beat USC, Brandon, they go to the Pac-12 championship.
Yeah, that's true.
So Colorado is not going to be a scrub, and you're looking at Texas A&M with this quarterback battle, Brandon, and a lot of questions surrounding that. What's going to happen with Jimbo Fisher and his offense? If Colorado can pull the upset off, Brandon, do you want to? I think that might be the biggest win in like the past few years for the Pac-12. If a team like Colorado can upset A&M, who's probably going to compete for the SEC West. So that's why I have that one. Plus, A&M comes to Colorado, Brandon. So that's a big game for that city. And then, of course, we have UCLA LSU, September 4th. Brandon, this is a big game for Chip Kelly. We have been super critical of him on this podcast. We don't really know what he's going to bring this year. He probably has his best UCLA team in his tenure at UCLA. Dorian Thompson Robinson's back. The running back room is a question mark due to Demetric Felton leaving, but the offensive line, D-line, secondary could be there. My thing here is LSU's coming off a historically bad defensive year, a 5-5 year. If UCLA goes out there and LSU goes over to LA and blows them out, huge loss for the Pac-12. That's a black stain on their resume. But for me, Brandon, UCLA doesn't have to win this game for it to be a win for the Pac-12. Just be competitive, because I don't think there's a lot of people who think UCLA is going to be competitive against LSU. It's because of the hype surrounding LSU this year. Let's be honest, has gotten just to a maximum level. I mean, you had our guy Blake Ruffino on NOLA television saying that this team has the aura of the 2019 team. So
me off, dude. It really is. I'm not gonna lie to you. That makes me so mad. You can't do that. You can't go out here and say, "Oh, I don't mean to turn this into this," but that's making me so mad. How many people are so hyped about LSU? Don't get that hype yet.
And I mean, I think this is a huge statement. I mean, if UCLA can pull off this upset, I mean, you're talking about an interesting Pac-12 race developing, and two, Coach O has every side eye in Baton Rouge, and maybe the state of Louisiana looking at him if he loses to UCLA week 1.
Yeah, no doubt.
Huge. And it's a big road trip, and people forget traveling those long distances can even out a game to a point where you're not really thinking about it, and especially because it's early, and LSU has some positions that are very young. But I think it's a very good matchup week 1, because I think Dorian Thompson-Robinson is going to be a great matchup for that LSU D-line because he's mobile. And also, I also like what Max Johnson brings. And can that UCLA secondary keep up with the LSU core of wide receivers? So this game has so many storylines. And then the last one I want to touch, Brandon, is USC Notre Dame. Always a game I look forward to. I'm just going to say it and we're going to move on because we've spent a lot of time on this. It is imperative on October 23rd that USC wins this game.
Yeah.
If you lose to Notre Dame this year, man, I don't know what to tell you. Because especially if USC goes on and wins the Pac-12, no chance at the playoffs. They won't even sniff it, because there's no way Notre Dame with a brand new quarterback who has a lot of questions, and also all the questions on the offensive line, the defensive line, should go in there and beat a USC team that's returning almost every major contributor from last season. Right. It just shouldn't happen. If you don't beat Notre Dame this year, it's a whole problem for USC, in my opinion. But, Brandon, let's get to the conference games. Go over some of the conference games that you picked for the Pac-12 this year.
I think the most important conference game of the season is going to be Oregon and Washington. And it always is, Zach. This is always one of the most important games in the Pac-12. It's probably the best rivalry in the Pac-12. One of the best rivalries in the country, no doubt. This game is going to be so important this season, Zach, because it comes in November 6th, so it's really late in the season. And this will determine the Pac-12 North, whoever wins this game, because I think both of these teams will be playing fairly well at this point in the season. I'm not going to say they're going to be undefeated at this point in the season, but they're going to be neck and neck. And the winner of this game, I'm going to go ahead and call it, is going to win the Pac-12 North. There's no question about it. So that is probably the most important game in the Pac-12 this season.
I love it. November 6th. And, I'll stick with that date.
Yeah.
I also think USC Arizona State that day. I mean, you could have two divisions figured out on the same day for the Pac-12.
Yeah.
I mean, Arizona State came like one play from beating USC week 1 last year. In my opinion, I think USC Arizona State could be even a more competitive game than Washington Oregon, because I think Oregon might be just a little bit better than Washington, but Arizona State, to me, Brandon, I know we're going to get into it later, is just such a hard team to predict, because any day something could happen with that NCAA investigation, and then what? We don't know who their quarterback might be. Like, there's so much playing into Arizona State, and also how connected is that team? They're returning a lot of starters, but they've went through a lot of turmoil this offseason. So has it brought the team closer together, Brandon, or has it tore it apart? That's my biggest question with Arizona State, but that's a very important one. But I also want to get into one that I think people are overlooking. That's a UCLA USC November 20th.
Yep.
Last year, that game came down to the wire. I believe it was an overtime game, one of the last weeks of the season. UCLA almost pulled the upset. They were like 1 or 2 plays off. Personally, I think this might determine the South, Brandon. I know that kind of sounds crazy, and we'll get into UCLA a little bit later, but I really like this matchup this year. I think that swagger that UCLA was showing late in the season last year could carry over. I think UCLA USC could play a bigger role in determining the Pac-12 champion than a lot of people are giving credit for.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Zach. No, okay, so I meant undefeated in conference. I didn't mean undefeated altogether. And I didn't say undefeated. I said neck and neck. So I know I did it first.
That's our guy, Mo. I know he's a big Ohio State guy. He was not having that. And, Brandon, I want to cover the last 2 games real quick before we move on to players to watch. Also, I'm looking at very closely Colorado and Utah, November 26th. I think that's going to play a big role in determining who's going to be the number 1 challenge in the South Division. Who can really challenge USC and Arizona State in that South Division? Colorado, Utah is an interesting matchup. It's going to be a defensive battle. I love what both of these teams are bringing. And then on the flip side, Cal Stanford is that matchup for the South Division, in my opinion. The North Division, in my opinion. I think Cal versus Stanford is going to be a very good game. I think both teams have a lot of questions surrounding important positions, but that game's really going to determine who's going to finish in the top half of that division and who might fall down to the irrelevant teams at the bottom half of the North Division. So I really like Cal versus Stanford as well. But let's get to our players to watch here, Brandon. This one, I'll let you kick it off, but I kind of got a little carried away. Brandon, I hope you have some offensive players, because all my players are defensive players. So just a heads up.
All my players are offensive players. This kind of works.
Hey, this is why we're co-hosts, man. This is why it works well. I'll let you kick it off, man.
All right, man. I'm going to go ahead and start with a player that you guys probably heard of from last season, but he might not be like number 1 on your radar. That's going to be Rashad White out of Arizona State. He's a junior running back. And Zach, the biggest stat line that I saw on him was that he was the only running back last season to average 10 yards a carry. Like, how wild is that, first of all? That's nuts. We're not talking about like, oh, he had 2 carries and one of those was for 20 yards. No, he had 42 touches, 420 yards in 4 games, Zach. So he averaged, in his first 2 games, he had over 150 yards each game. So he kind of slumped off toward the end of the season. He scored all 5 of his touchdowns in those first 2 games. But it's going to be super exciting to watch, Zach. Not only did he have those yards rushing, he also had 8 receptions for 151 yards. So this guy's averaging 19 yards a catch as well. He's just a dual threat guy. He can run the ball, he can catch the ball, and he's going to be a huge threat alongside Jaden Daniels on this Arizona State offense.
Oh, man, I love that pick, man. And they had some very strong running backs toward the end of the year. When I believe it was 60-something to nothing or something like that, they beat Arizona and they just ran it like right down their throats. And I guess it's Arizona, so I guess you could put as much weight into that as possible. I think they were the most efficient run game in the Pac-12 last year, Brandon, with Arizona State because of the offensive line and Jaden Daniels being so dynamic with his feet. But I love that pick. And, for me, I'm going to go Michael Wright from Oregon, defensive back. I've been a huge fan of this kid for a long time, and I know Brandon's probably like, yes, you've mentioned him every time we talk about Oregon, but Brandon, he had a very impressive freshman season for me. I love what he did his freshman year, but last year he showed he seemed to either be impacted by COVID and showed some inconsistency in which I think a lot of those opt-outs put a lot more pressure on him, and he didn't get as much help in the secondary as he thought he was really going to get. And with his elite speed, Brandon, it makes him a problem in one-on-one situations. When he's playing press man, Brandon, he had the second highest coverage grade in the country in press man coverage just because people can't get by him, and he just has the speed to pretty much toy with you. As soon as he gets his hips flipped around, he's outrunning you no matter where you're going. And his freshman season, Brandon, as a true freshman starting at Oregon, only allowed 8 total catches and held quarterbacks to a 28.4 passer rating. You have a better passer rating just throwing the ball away every time.
Yeah.
I mean, outstanding. And 48 total tackles, 13 pass breakups in his first 2 seasons at Oregon. And Brandon, the other reason I like him, I love special teams, man. It's the most electric play. Like if you get a kick return, it changes the whole game. Michael Wright averages almost 30 yards a kick return, Brandon, and had 2 kick return touchdowns his freshman year. And this year at Oregon, Brandon, they finally get right back. Bennett Williams steps in at safety. Jamal Hill steps back in at corner, and they return Verone McKinley III in the secondary. All these guys gained a lot of experience due to all the opt-outs Oregon had last year. This Oregon secondary is going to return to its peak performance. I love this Oregon defense, man, and I really think Michael Wright is going to be the key to Oregon returning to its defensive dominance we saw 2 years ago.
And that's such a dynamic defense too, because it's not only him; it's probably the best defensive player in the country in Kayvon Thibodeau. They've got Noah Sewell. I mean, they've got as many players as you can count. Like all Pac-12 defense might just be their starting defense. So that is a super great choice, Zach. I'm going to go on with my second choice here, and you already mentioned him earlier in this episode, but Dorian Thompson Robinson, dude, this is going to be the season because last year, Zach. He's been good. He's been good over his first 3 seasons, but last year he took a giant leap forward, in my opinion, at least. He went from averaging right around 59% completion percentage in his first 2 seasons to 65 last year, Zach. That's a 6% jump in that. And not only that, but the most important thing to me is that he finally started utilizing his mobility. Like he's always had that ability to move around in the pocket, to scramble. He's just never really done it. Over his first 2 seasons, he averaged right around 1 yard per carry. I guess sacks really play into that. This UCLA offensive line isn't the greatest. But last season, Zach, he had more rushing yards than he's had over his first 2 seasons. He had 55 carries for 306 yards, 3 touchdowns. I mean, he's averaging 6 yards a carry. So this guy can really get it done with his legs, and he just hasn't shown us that to this point. Last season, he also had 156.3 passer rating, which is unreal. I mean, that's just a wild number, especially for him. I mean, because he's hovered right around 100 for his first 2 seasons. Then to make that jump to 156.3 is just outstanding. 12 touchdowns to 4 interceptions last year. 1,120 yards passing, 8.1 yards per pass. The guy's making giant leaps forward already, and I think this season we're really going to see him break out of his shell. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he came out as the offensive MVP in the Pac-12 this season. I know Keaton Slovis is right there in the same city even, but Dorian Thompson Robinson, there's something about him. He's so explosive and he's such a playmaker. I really think that he has the possibility to get the job done.
I mean, I agree with you. And I mean, when you look at what Dorian Thompson brings, it's just the versatility to get out in space, and he can throw outside. Once he gets out of the pocket, he can make just about any throw. The only thing I want to see is just his decision-making keep increasing. Last year, even though his interceptions were low, he still threw in double coverage a lot of the times. He threw in tight coverage. He's just that gunslinger that he's not afraid to put it into a tight window, and I love that to a point, but you got to be smart with it. And I think a few of those DBs, so they come down with the ball, we could be having a different conversation. but I love what he's bringing. I think another year in Chip Kelly's system, he's only going to take a step forward. So I definitely think he'll be an underrated player to look for that Pac-12 Offensive Player of the Year. And, I told you I got all defensive guys. Devin Lloyd for Utah is probably a name that we might be the only channel on YouTube or, streaming that has mentioned this guy's name. But for me, watching his highlights, man, and watching what he can bring to this Utah defense, he's one of the most versatile linebackers in the entire country. I think he's a sleeper for Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year. And Brandon, looking at his where he lined up, he played multiple snaps at off the ball linebacker, edge rusher, free safety, and even moved out to slot defensive back. So He can play so many different positions, which allows this defense for Utah to be so versatile in what they call and what they scheme up, and they can put Devin Lloyd in the best spot to make the biggest impact in these big games. Over 145 tackles, 21 for loss, 8.5 sacks. Brandon, he was top 5 in the Pac-12 in tackles for loss, and he was top 10 in sacks. I love what he brings. And when he ranked 5th in the country in terms of off-the-ball linebackers and was 6th in run defensive grade and also 2nd in run stop rate for the whole country, Brandon. And I think he's a dark horse for the Buckets Award. There's been a little bit of talk about him being the new leader of this Utah defense. So I think Devin Lloyd is a name that, people don't know yet, but should by the end of the season. I really like what he brings to this Utah defense.
Yeah, I agree with you, Zach. I've got 2 more I want to mention real quick, and I'll go ahead and throw them both here because I don't have a ton to say about them yet, especially the second one. But my first pick here, or I guess third pick, the first pick for this segment or for this section is going to be Drake London, the USC wide receiver. He's going to be wide receiver 1 in the Trojans offense. He's going to benefit from a great quarterback in Keaton Slovis. Everybody knows how much I love Keaton. But not only that, Zach, he's just going to be that outside deep threat. At 6'5", he plays so long. And last season alone, I mean, he had 502 receiving yards, averaged 15 yards per catch, 33 receptions. So this guy is going to be, I think for sure, I don't think there's any doubt, he's going to be the wide receiver 1 in this offense. Second guy I want to mention, and I had to mention him, is Chris Curry at Utah, LSU transfer to Utah. Zach, one thing I found out about him, and I guess I never really realized this, he's never scored a collegiate touchdown, and he's going into his 4th season. So 3 seasons at LSU, never scored a touchdown. But the thing I want to point out is the one game where he was utilized correctly, and I think that's where he's kind of struggled. I don't know that the coaching staff has really utilized him to his strengths, and I think his strengths were really shown in the game against Oklahoma in the playoff game at LSU, where Clyde Edwards-Helaire was hurt. We saw him put up what he put up. He put up 90 yards on 16 carries against Oklahoma. I mean, he just ran them up and down the field, and that's 6 yards per carry, Zach. So I think he has the potential to be good, especially in this offense that is pretty much brand new. They have a new quarterback as well in Charlie Brewer. But Chris Curry's going to be super exciting to watch. I'm curious to know what he'll do in this Utah offense.
Yeah, I mean, I like it. And, I mean, for me, as we wrap this segment up here, is I know I mentioned Michael Wright from Oregon. If there's a DB that can challenge him for the number 1, I guess, defensive back award in the Pac-12, it would be Trent McDuffie at Washington.
Yeah. And
I think he's going to be the number 1 DB for the Huskies, especially after Elijah Molden heads to the NFL draft. And I think I honestly think McDuffie is going to be the next great Washington defensive back, another Jimmy Lake disciple in that back end of the defense. And, there's this stigma on DBs, Brandon. I know everyone knows what I'm talking about DBs not being able to tackle. This goes straight to the wayside when you look at someone like McDuffie. Brandon, he's only missed 2 tackles his entire career.
Yeah.
I mean, that is just – people don't understand how impressive that is when you're out in space like a DB to only miss 2 tackles attempts your entire career. And he also grades as the second best run defense by a DB by Pro Football Focus as well. And his speed and length helps him be one of the best DBs at stopping the deep ball, Brandon. Quarterbacks who threw 20 or plus yards down the field against him were 1 for 8 with an interception. At such a high level of making sure you got the ball skills, the speed, the form, the technique. Everything has to be right for you to be that efficient at guarding against the deep ball. He's also, Brandon, one of only 3 defensive backs in the country who have a 75 or higher grade by Pro Football Focus in both man coverage and zone coverage. So he can play whatever you want him to play. He can line up different places. He can travel as a DB, which is one of the things I love to see out of a DB. Don't just be a zone corner. Go get the best receiver and shut him down, and that's what McDuffie can do. He's not going to receive many targets, Brandon. Last year, only 8 targets all season in 2020. And the year before, he was targeted 56 times. So he shut it down real quick. They learned real quick not to throw it at McDuffie. And so what I expect for Jimmy Lake to do is, one, put him on the best wide receiver on the field and say, that's your guy, go shut him down, and or scheme him into position to make big plays. So I'm really, really looking forward to seeing how Jimmy Lake schemes McDuffie into his system. I think McDuffie is a guy you have to look for to be that sleeper first-round NFL draft pick next year. And right now, him and Mykael Wright are the 2 best DBs in the Pac-12, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think you might be right, Zach.
And, I mean, we got to move on to our sleepers. It's the last segment before we make our official predictions. So, Brandon, I'll kick this one off because I've been tossing them to you.
Yeah, I know we had the same one. I know we had the same one.
Oh, man. So who is yours? I'll let you call it.
It's Colorado. It has to be Colorado.
Oh, no.
Right?
No.
Go ahead.
You were wrong. You were wrong. You were so wrong. Way off base there, Brandon. My sleeper is UCLA. Got the UCLA Bruins here as my sleeper, and I have been one of the most critical, loud voices on any podcast, any YouTube channel about how Chip Kelly has underperformed as UCLA's head coach. But I'm so excited for what this team brings to the field this year, brings to the Pac-12. Like I said earlier, this is the most complete team Chip Kelly has had at UCLA, but consistency has been a problem, Brandon. They can play lights out one week. The next week they come in and lay an egg. So I want to see how consistent UCLA can be this year, and that is the key to their success. And you already mentioned my X factor, which is Dorian Thompson-Robinson. If he can take his game to the next level, Brandon, I really think UCLA can make a lot of noise in the Pac-12. Last season, you mentioned he set career highs in QB rating, passer efficiency, yards per attempt, and completion percentage. He's thrown for over 5,000 yards in his career. But when I look at this team, Brandon, my biggest question mark of just terms of who's going to step up is the secondary. They only rank 9th in the Pac-12 in terms of returning production in the defensive secondary. Jerry Azzarino at defensive coordinator has to find out what they got early. And I think LSU coming in week 1 is going to be such a great litmus test to where you are in terms of that defensive backfield, because Kayshon Boutte and the boys are not coming to play when they ride into LA week 1. And I think you're going to find out exactly how good you are. And from there, you can make adjustments, because you probably won't see as strong of a wide receiving core as you will when LSU comes into town. But when you look at the defense, Jay Shaw, Cam Johnson are going to be the leaders of the secondary. But outside of Quentin Lake, I don't know what that second safety spot's going to be like. There's a lot of unproven potential there. But Lake also, for some reason, Brandon, they won't stick him at safety. He plays a lot of slot corner, but when he plays solely safety, he's 4th in the conference in coverage grade out of everybody. So I just want to see them stick Lake at safety. Shaw and Johnson can man the corner spots, and then they just have to find one more piece for that back end, probably like a nickel type safety as well. So those are the 2 biggest things for me to determine whether UCLA can make an impact. Defensive line, Mitchell Agude is the number 1 edge rusher returning. He ranked, Brandon, above Kayvon Thibodeau as an edge rusher last year. He was the number 1 player in the Pac-12 in terms of pass rushing grade, had 23 tackles, 8 for loss, 2.5 sacks last year. And the Bruins defensive line is the most underrated part of their team. Brandon, they averaged 3.3 sacks a game last year, and also led the Pac-12 in rushing yards allowed per carry with under 3.6. I think the Bruins can be a team waiting for a spark. And if it gets hot early, especially if that LSU game goes their way, Brandon, I don't know if they're going to be touched for – I don't know. Like, that team could get so hot so fast and things to start going downhill for their opponents. And if it gets hot, I would not be surprised to see UCLA in the Pac-12 championship game. Last year, they were 1-2 plays from pulling the huge upset to give USC their first loss. This team, like I said, was playing with such a swagger. I think if Chip Kelly's going to get it done, Brandon, it's this year with this UCLA team.
Yeah, I really like that pick, actually. I like UCLA a lot this season. Obviously, I already yelled out my pick. I've got Colorado. I'm not saying that they're going to be a very good team win-wise this year, Zach, because they have a brutal schedule. Like, have you taken a look at their schedule yet?
It's tough. It's bad.
They get Arizona State on the road. They get Oregon on the road, UCLA on the road, and Utah on the road to wrap out the season, Zach. So that's tough. But this team was a lot better than expected last season, Zach. I think their defense was highlighted by Nate Landman, obviously. And I think Carson Wells is a really underrated linebacker on this defense as well. But the highlight of this team, Zach, had to be Jarek Broussard. He was the best running back in the conference last season. I don't even think it was close. 895 yards rushing over 6 games, 5 touchdowns, 6 yards per carry. If he has a season that's this good again, this Colorado team, this offense, I don't know if you can stop them. I really don't. They will be stopped, especially with these road games at Oregon, at Utah, whatever it is. But if they can steal one of those games, Zach, I think that's really a success. If they can take that Utah game, if they can take that Oregon game, really even if they can take that UCLA game, all I'm saying here is that this team is going to be a lot better than the record indicates by the end of the season.
I've no doubt. I honestly like that pick, and I also think my honorable mention will be Utah if I had to pick another team, and it's only because Kyle Whittingham can never be counted out, man. I love what Kyle Whittingham brings to this team, and also Brandon. Do what?
Talk trash about him. I want to hear it.
Yeah, I know, but he's a good coach. I just thought they was ranked a little too high. I mean, he's still a top 15 coach in the country, which always a great thing. And also, their passing game held them back so much last year, Brandon. We know what Ty Jordan was bringing at the running back spot, but their passing game was the second worst efficient attack in the conference. That is not going to win you many games. They bring in Charlie Brewer from Baylor. They bring in Chris Curry at running back. They have a backfield now that I think can compete with the best of them. And Charlie Brewer, when he was in a similar system like this, had a great 2018 season, but then bringing in Larry Fedora in that spread attack, that didn't fit his skill set, and his stats really went down over the next few years.
They were my honorable mention as well, and it's really just going to depend on which Charlie Brewer you get. I think you're right. He's going to benefit from this system, but he was so hit or miss. He was so hit or miss this past season. Even in 2019, he was pretty hit or miss. And he's really good when he's on, but man, it's tough when he's not.
Well, in 2018, so if you look at the offense, it was a lot of RPOs and play action, and he thrives off of that. If you could just get him some time and let him work off that play action RPO game, Charlie Brewer is one of the best quarterbacks in the country. But when you're in that spread attack and you have to let routes develop, you have to make good decisions with the ball, it just doesn't fit what he does well. When you look at him, man, when you look at this offense that Andy Ludwig is bringing in, it's going to fit his run first, pass second more approach, where
he's a really good handoff quarterback.
It's not a handoff quarterback. It's just you can't just let him shoulder everything. He's gonna need a little bit of help in the terms of the run game. And Baylor's run game was not great these past 2 years, and the weapons weren't there, Brandon. When you look at Utah, they're returning the second best wide receiving unit in the conference, which is way more than what Baylor was returning these past 2 years. And also, you could tell Brewer can push the ball down the field, as he was top 30 in accurate pass rate beyond the line of scrimmage. He can push it down the field if it's there. The question mark for me is how is he going to fit in the system and how has he learned it? But Charlie Brewer is a huge upgrade over what they had last year. So if everything goes together for Utah, I have no doubt that they can be one of the top teams in the Pac-12. And so I like what they're bringing. And, I know you called me out for talking about Whittingham, but I still think he's a great coach. And I would say he's a top Pac-12 coach for sure.
Just not number like 6 or whatever they had him at. That was
I think they had him like almost top 5. And I was like, I don't know about that one, Chief. But, guys, it is time for our official predictions. So we're going to put them up here, and y'all can give us y'all's thoughts, share your predictions as well. Let's see if this will pop up. So I think that's one of the first times we disagreed heavily on this in terms of who's winning. But I'm on the left, B-Dub's on the right, of course. I have Oregon winning it all this year. Coming out of the North Division, I have Washington second, Stanford third, Cal fourth, Oregon State fifth, Washington State sixth in the West. In terms of, not in the West, in the North. In the South, I have USC winning, UCLA second, Arizona State 3, Utah 4, Colorado 5, Arizona 6. Brandon has USC winning the Pac-12 and Oregon winning the North, with Washington, Cal, Stanford, Oregon State, Washington State following. And in the South, he has USC, Arizona State, Utah, UCLA, Colorado, Arizona. So it looks like our biggest thing is, one, we don't agree on who wins the Pac-12, and two, I am much higher on UCLA than Brandon is based on these rankings.
You absolutely are.
But so Brandon, so explain your USC pick. You think this is the year USC gets it done?
I think it is. I think that Keaton Slovis is too good of a quarterback to be held back. Not only that, I think Clay Helton's been on the hottest seat in the country probably for the past 2 seasons now. This is going to his 3rd. He really has something to prove. This team kind of has, I'd say, a chip on their shoulder just because everything I've seen so far, Zach, has Oregon or Washington winning the Pac-12. Like, you can go look at almost any article in this country. It's mostly Oregon, some Washington winning the Pac-12. I think UCLA sees themselves being counted out, but I think that they have maybe the best passing game in the Pac-12. They have a solid core of receivers, and I don't know, man. I just feel something special about this UCLA team this season.
Man, I'm not gonna lie. It worries me a little bit that Keaton Slovis would be the best quarterback on the field if Oregon and USC faced off today. It is it's a little bit worrisome. I'm not gonna lie to you, but the thing that separates it is, I think when you look at the roster from, just from a roster standpoint, I think Oregon wins every single other position for me.
Yeah.
If you're comparing across the board, I think they got the better core of wide receivers. I think CJ Verdell is a better running back than anyone USC has. The offensive line's better. Definitely think the D-line, the secondary, and linebackers are better. I don't think there's even a conversation in terms of who has the better defense.
No argument whatsoever. Sorry, I what?
Okay, so I guess if you look at outside of Kayvon Thibodeau, USC could have an argument depending. So the thing for USC that holds them back for me, though, Brandon, is, Drake Jackson, yes, great edge defender, but I don't know if Corey Foreman's going to play. How big of a role is Corey Foreman going to play? And outside of Corey Foreman and Drake Jackson, who do they have on the inside of that defensive line?
I mean, great questions, all of them. But I think Corey Foreman comes in and plays immediately. He's been playing a lot in fall camp. He's Corey Foreman, dude. He was the number 1 recruit over this last season. You can say whatever you want. Oh, he was just a recruit. Brian Bresee was just a recruit, and look what he did at Clemson. So I don't think that's a real argument. I'm not saying this Southern Cal defense is the greatest in the world. I just think their offense is overpowered. Yes, you're right. CJ Verdell is probably one of the best running backs. I'd say right behind Broussard at Colorado for best running back in the Pac-12. But I don't know. This USC team has to win at some point, right? They've been back for 3 seasons now, I think. This is going to be their 3rd season coming back. They have to win. They have to. This is they win or Clay Helton's gone.
Man. So I mean, I think he'll be fine if he gets there. I mean, it depends on how they get beat. The only worry I have about my pick with Oregon is Anthony Brown.
That's a worry because he hasn't has he even been officially named starting quarterback yet? I don't think I don't think.
Yeah, I think he pretty much has. It's pretty much a foregone conclusion. He's going to start week 1. Yeah, I mean he's QB1. I think they're still trying to say Thompson is I guess learning the offense or something. But I have no doubt that if Ohio State blows their doors off week 2, I have no doubt that they're putting Ty Thompson in over Anthony Brown. And if in my opinion, I guess this is opinion, but I think if you can win the Pac-12 with Tyler Shaw, you can win the Pac-12 with Anthony Brown.
That was mean. That was really mean.
I mean, I don't see Tyler Shaw as like a huge upgrade over Anthony Brown. And also you saw what Tyler Shaw kind of collapsed down the stretch, and then Anthony Brown was taking over his job. Anthony Brown scored the first touchdown in the Pac-12 championship. Yeah, against USC. So I think Oregon's biggest concern is quarterback, which is the most important position. But Brandon, if you look at the roster, I mean, it's hard to think that team can't carry whatever quarterback they have back there to the Pac-12 championship at minimum.
No, yeah, there's not a lot of holes. Like, not a lot of holes in this Oregon team. Really the only big hole, I think, it has to be quarterback, because they're returning all 5 offensive linemen. I want to say I think they're returning like 92% of their production from last season. So it's
pretty significant, and like a lot of that is from Tyler Shaw not coming back.
Yeah,
which I mean, it kind of shows you how powerful this Oregon team is when the quarterback who won the Pac-12 championship decided to transfer out because his job didn't feel safe.
That's true.
I mean, how often do we see a quarterback win a championship and transfer?
Not a lot.
It's honestly not often. So, but man, guys, these are our official Pac-12 predictions. We're going to be putting them on social media soon and everything like that, man. But we definitely appreciate y'all tuning in, man. This has been our Pac-12 preview. I know it's a Monday night. We had to push it up because the season starts Saturday. We had to get these last 2 in. Tune in Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Central Time, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook for our SEC preview. I know a lot of our listeners are pumped for that one, so make sure to tune in there. Make sure to subscribe if you're new. If you're watching over on Twitter, Facebook, make sure to retweet or share the stream, everything like that, man. And also come over to YouTube and subscribe, because that's where you can get all the Blue Bloods content that we post. And I promise you're going to want to be subscribed for the season. We have so much content coming your way. We're in the works for new things. We're going to put some things in place coming up starting later this week, so stay tuned for that. But, guys, we'll be back tomorrow morning with another fall camp update. We may or may not have a special episode. We'll have to see. But, guys, for the Blue Bloods, for B-Dub and myself, we are out.